And welcome back again to Franchising 101 with the OK VetWorks training. We're going to go through 20 questions that you need to be looking at as a franchise buyer that you should ask the franchise broker when you go through that process. So Dave and Phil are going to kind of tag team back and forth on these because there's about 20 questions here. And if we don't tag team, we're going to get tired of hearing Phil.
Phil talks too much, and we'll be here for eight days.
We don't have 8 days.
I know. That's why we're tag team.
We only got about 10 minutes.
Okay, I'm ready.
I feel like I'm David Letterman in the top 20 of this. We have things are going to fly across. Okay, let's get started. This is awesome.
So the drum roll number one.
Oh, boy. Here we go.
We'll go from 20 to 1, but 1's actually 20, okay?
So what experience do you have with particular franchises?
That's the first question.
That's the first question.
That's the first question.
Go ahead.
So number 2, what is the franchise's track record for success?
I think what you want to do here, the what's experience do you have? Obviously, you don't want to be the first person they've ever talked to. Now, that happens sometimes, and that isn't always necessarily a reflection of the quality of the franchise consultant that's working with you. If just because they haven't placed a franchise, people are always adding inventory or adding franchisers into their portfolio. So that shouldn't be an immediate disqualifier, but it should be a conversation you have, and you should feel comfortable with the answers they give you. Okay, I want to backstep. As far as the franchise track record, that's what that franchise disclosure document's for. Don't take them at their word. Make them show you the FDD, the franchise disclosure document. That's where they can get into average earnings for franchisees and how much did first-year people earn, and all the different stuff, all the legalese, all the stuff that's going to bind you is in that FDD.
8 days.
8 days.
We're going to be here 8 days.
No, we're not.
But again, if they don't have an FDD, they're not a franchise.
Right. Now, they could be a very reputable business opportunity. So we're not saying that they're not a reputable business. They're just not a franchise.
Next one. What are the startup costs involved?
Pretty cut and dry. I mean, how much are we going to pay? How much cash do you need? You got to think about things like, how am I going to feed my family? How am I going to pay my bills? I got to hire employees. I mean, there's a lot to consider. A good franchise consultant will help you put together a plan and a strategy for that. What's the franchise fee and what does it cover? Franchise fees are pretty direct. I mean, it is what it is. It's what you're paying for the right to have their business model, to be their representative in whatever market you're going into. There's also always going to be royalties and fees as well to talk about down the road.
So that's the 5th question. What are the ongoing royalties and fees, and how are they going to impact your pocketbook? And the next one, which is my favorite, what support and training is provided by the franchisors?
Yeah, I mean, the franchise, and this is a hodgepodge. A lot of this depends on what industry you're in,
yep,
right? And what model are you in?
Yep.
Now, because some people that buy a franchisees, and let's say it's to be an absentee or a semi-absentee owner, they're going to have a general manager, a manager, somebody that's running the day-to-day for them, right? So all those things need to be figured in, and you need to understand what's the support training provided to the franchisees. Again, everybody's going to tell you they have great training support. That's where that validation calls, really, you can weed that stuff out.
How long has the franchise been in business?
That's important. It's not the only thing, because remember, there was a first Subway that was ever sold. There was a first Chick-fil-A that was ever sold. So all we're saying is these are called emerging brands, okay? So a franchise a franchise opportunity that doesn't have a lot of track record, a lot of history, a lot of locations, they're just getting started as a franchise model, they're going to be called an emerging brand. Those can be great. Emerging brand can be great. You just got to do your due diligence, really understand what you're getting into, and understand that you're going to be one of the test dummies. Right?
Increased risk, right? It's an emerging brand. There's going to be some increased risk. Some of their systems aren't going to be completely vetted out yet. But you're going to have a lot more say in the vetting of those systems.
And you can catch lightning in a bottle. I mean, emerging markets, a lot of times explosive growth. I know one of our franchises that's in the roofing space sold 170 franchises their first year. A very, very popular, oh goodness, everybody's calling me. A very, very popular franchise, they're an emerging brand and sold almost 200 in the first year. Well, they didn't have anything in their FDD as far as income because they were an emerging brand.
Yeah.
But I think people were able to put 2 and 2 together and go, okay, everybody has a house. They're either renting or they're living. They have roofs. Roofs are going to need to be replaced. I mean, so you go through that, but you do want to pay extra attention on emerging brands.
How many franchises are currently open? What's the market share in the area where you live? How big is the opportunity for you and your family?
Yeah, and I think that's a big deal. And again, that goes back to common sense, right? Just having those conversations, doing a good job of that vetting process and validation process as you're going through. Franchise policy on renewing franchise agreements. This is one thing that I see a lot of people get messed up on. If you buy a franchise and you're not doing well with that franchise, most franchise agreements, there is a clause, they have a right to take your franchise back. Okay. It's a very important thing to understand. All right. You have to produce if you want to keep your franchise brand.
And you need to know what those restrictions are and how well you have to perform so you don't get yourself back into a corner and lose your business and all the effort you've put into it. The next one is what restrictions are placed on franchises in terms of location, product offerings, and branding.
Yeah. There's always going to be territories, right? And some franchises, the way they're built, there's no territory restrictions. Those are usually, you'll see a lot of like consulting type franchises where maybe they're helping you reduce costs for businesses. All the work's done online. It doesn't require a storefront, those types of things. Those are usually nationwide. There's really no boundaries. And then there's boundaries like, a good one's Blimpie Sub, for example, they have population requirements. They have restrictions on how many Blimpies within so many miles based on population. So there's all kinds of variables you have to look at. You really want to do your due diligence, make sure that you're not just getting squeezed into a territory, because what will happen sometimes is if they say a minimum population base of 50,000 and they do the territory validation run and it says 50,240, yeah, technically that's enough, but it's at the absolute bottom, which would cause me concern. Okay. So you want to really think about those things and do your due diligence.
Yeah, the next one, this is really important. What type of marketing and advertising support are you going to get from the franchisor? And I'm going to tell you this: marketing and advertising. If you're not in that space yet, or you haven't dealt with it, man, it is a dangerous space. So make sure they're going to give you support, and make sure you know what it costs and what your expected return on that investment is for your business. So it's one of those things I tell people. You spend $500, you're going to make $2,000. We would do that all day long.
Sure.
You need to know what your ROI is on your marketing and advertising from the franchise. Get some stats from the franchisor and other franchise owners to understand what you're stepping into.
Let's see here. I lost my place.
Resolving
Dave.
disputes. What is a franchise's process for resolving disputes?
Yeah, and that's all going to be laid out in the FDD. That's going to be very clear. You make sure you understand the rules of the road on that.
And number 13, Phil.
What's the franchise policy on transferring ownership or reselling of the franchise? How are they going to handle if you pass? How's the transfer of that going to be handled? Every franchisor is going to have a different policy on this. I mean, they're all going to have their little nuanced parts and what's allowed and what isn't allowed. But very, very important to understand, how do you get out of the business, and what happens in the unfortunate if the unfortunate happens and you pass or become disabled and aren't able to go perform the duties. How's all that handled? You want to make sure you understand that.
And number 14, what is the franchise policy on site selection and lease negotiation?
Most of these franchisors, it's pretty cut and dry. It's very early on. They tell you, this is our requirement. There is no deviation. This is how it's going to be done. You don't get a lot of flexibility in site selection. You don't get a lot of flexibility in how you want to leave. Typically, you get no flexibility when it comes to how the store is going to be laid out. It's going to be laid out the way it's going to be laid out, which is the way they tell you it's going to be laid out. And that's one of the things, again, it goes back to, they know that this works. And that's why they're so adamant about those types of things.
That's a fact.
Any financing options available for franchisees?
Yes, there are.
Yeah, there's some franchisors, offer financing direct. But there are plenty of lenders out there that specialize in franchise financing. Again, it goes back to consultants. We've talked about that in the past. Franchise consultants that are worth their weight have multiple ways to help you get financing through the SBA, private lenders, 401k providers, all kinds of different ways to do it. Okay. So, but they need to have the ability to help you with those things.
Number 16, what is the franchise's policy on ordering supplies and inventory? And this is where you've got to be careful because you're paying royalties already. There are some franchises that make you order your supplies from the franchisor.
And I'd say that's most guys.
So, know what it is, know what that costs, and how you're going to manage it. It's not a bad thing.
Yeah, it's just
something you need to know going into it because some people want to cut costs.
Yep.
And they want to stop paying those fees to the franchisors, and they try to go do something different. And then they lose their franchise because they violated the franchise agreement.
Yeah, big
like
deal.
wrapping the Subway sandwich in a plain paper bag.
Yeah.
It's just not going to work.
Just not going to work.
Subway wrap.
Yeah, it's just not going to work. And I think, And I think the brand awareness, obviously, franchisors are going to be very, very, very protective of the brand. I mean, because it affects not only your store. If you have a Subway shop in ABC America and you run a poor business and you're not following the protocol, and you're not doing the stuff the right way, well, that hurts every Subway shop around. And so they're very protective of the brand. And remember this, when you're doing, I think the best potential partners as a franchisor-franchisee relationship is when the franchisor is truly trying to find ways to disqualify you as a franchisee. Because that means they have high standards. That means they have expectations. That means they're really going through the process and really seeing, okay, are these people a good fit to represent our brand? That's the kind of franchise you want to work with. Somebody that's really digging in.
You don't want to be the one that's not good. So
you don't want somebody that says fog and mirror, write a check, good luck, because it's not going to work out well for anybody.
It's gonna be bad, and they probably have been very successful along the way. And this goes back to the next question: what are the franchisors' expectations for sales and revenue for the organization?
Yeah, and those are very clearly laid out. I mean, and they're the franchisor, especially franchisors that have track records and history, they can tell you to the almost penny based on your market surveys and geographical studies, everything they've done, how much you're going to make. I mean, which is one of the benefits to buying a franchise. It takes a lot of the guesswork out. As long as you do A, B, C, D, E, F, and G,
you should get this.
You're going to probably make you're probably going to make about this amount, give or take a percentage point. I mean, they can get right down to it. So that's one of the cool things about it. Those conversations those happen very early in the process. And again, all that stuff is disclosed in the FDD.
That's fact. What is the franchise policy on local and national competitions?
Yeah, I mean, it's a real. I mean, for every franchise, there's usually, like, say, if you have a Subway sandwich shop, in most towns, there's 2 or 3 other shops that aren't franchise brands. Right, that you can go get a sandwich from, okay? Or there might be a competing market down at the convenience store, right? I mean, they study all that. They look at all that. Because remember, franchisors don't make their money on your franchise fee. They make their money on the royalties. I mean, that's where they make their profit, is they have a vested interest in making you successful because that's where they make their real money. Okay, it's not on the upfront 50 or 100, or even if it's $1 million franchise fee, which some are out there on some of the bigger, more reputable, or not reputable, but the bigger,
more
prominent brands that generate taller or higher top end numbers. It's obvious you're going to pay more if you got a model that you can go make 20 million a year with top line revenue. Well, they're going to charge more than one that you can go make 400,000 top line revenue. It just kind of stands to reason, right? But they know all that stuff. They track that stuff. They're all over it.
It's a fact. What is the franchise policy on e-commerce and internet sales?
Again, that's all disclosed in the FDD. You don't have to do any guesswork, but make sure you're looking at the franchise disclosure document for that data, not the person on the other end of the phone. Whether that's a broker, a consultant, or somebody direct with the franchise, look at the FDD, validate what they're telling you with that FDD. It's imperative.
Act like you're from Missouri, the show me state. Show me where it is in the FDD.
That's right.
Where I can find it.
And Dave, that might be the best thing any of us have said on any of our episodes is treat that FDD like it's the Gideon. I mean, you follow that because it is, as it is. I'm telling you, that's what controls and dictates everything in the relationship between a franchisee and a franchisor.
So back to the final question. that we're going to offer you to ask your franchise broker or potential franchisor is this: what is the franchisor's long-term vision and growth goal for the organization?
Yeah, it's interesting because usually this is how it goes, right? So you'll have an individual that ran a really successful heating and air business, and they're trying to think of ways that they can, that they can grow, their verticals, right? How can I go grow my business? So they go talk to different people. They say, you know what? I want a franchise. Great. They go out, they'll sell 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 franchises. And then what happens? They become very attractive to private equity groups. Private equity groups show up, say, we'll give you $1 gazillion for your franchise. The original founder of it sells to this private equity group or this group that specializes in franchise development. And now the people that originally launched it are, sometimes they stick around as an advisor or something, but usually they're just gone. They just go enjoy their time on the beach with their big bags of money. And this group now takes over. And that's where it gets weird sometimes, right? Typically people that founded it, that birthed it, that it was their baby, they're a little more dialed into the long term. When you get into private equity groups, not that they want to make money. I mean, which everybody does. There's nothing wrong with that. They're going to spend a lot more time on squeezing every dime of profit they can out of everything they can. Many times position it for resell down the road in 5 to 7 years. So you got to be really, and that's a good question to ask. Who is the ownership group of this franchise? That's a very good question to ask. Who owns it? Is it the original people? Is it the family of the founders? Or is it a private equity group or some outside group of business owners?
Has it been sold 5 times?
Has it been sold 5 times? Yeah, very good.
That was 20 questions.
Whew, good.
I'm
Didn't
worn
take 8
out.
days. How long did it take? I can't
6
see.
days.
How many days?
6 days.
You cut it down by 2.
Okay,
You were 8 days,
good.
you were
Good.
down
Well,
to 6,
I'm fine with that.
6 days. Hey, I want to thank everybody for listening to this because this is a long discussion. There's a lot of information in this. So make sure you watch this one twice and make sure you take some good notes because, it's all about preparing yourself for what's next.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think we've got one more to do. And that was going to be on why should I purchase a franchise over starting my own business?
That's exciting.
What are the
That's a fun
differences there
question.
and why do we want to look at that? So we will see you next time right here.